Welcome back, everybody, to another episode here of Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, if it's your first time or your 50th time joining us here at Bulletproof Selling, then you should be reminded or know that, hey, hope is not a sales strategy. So we are here each and every week to help increase the performance of salespeople and the performance of their pipelines. Now, this Bulletproof Selling series is an interview series where I get to welcome guests from all over the country and all over the world, the top minds in sales, speakers, authors, trainers, consultants, and of course, those that are actually out there in the field managing sales teams, having to duck, dodge, and weave as the world constantly changes around them and their teams. Now, my commitment out of every one of these shows is that we will build a sales system with our guest that you can use no matter the size of your goals or the size of your team. And I am very, very happy to be welcoming a guest that I've been looking forward to having on here for quite some time. He's been a mentor of mine, someone that's helped me walk through a couple of very interesting sales challenges, but he also manages quite a large sales team, and he's had a whole career of doing this. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about how his salespeople have stopped relying on hope and moved into some better methods for making better relationships and connections. Well, let me welcome to the show, Mr. J.D. Giles. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Sean, how you doing today?
It's a good day, sir. So for those of us that haven't been able to read your bio yet, tell us a little bit about you, the company you work for, and the sales team that you lead.
Sure. So I'm a 21-year employee of Schneider Electric, and as a company, we have a passion about delivering energy. We actually have a vision that is energy is a human right. We do this globally. We're a very large company, but really, when you boil that down into what we do as an organization, we deliver systems around energy and energy distribution, as well as industrial automation. And so we're a very large organization. I happen to lead an organization of about 111 sellers, mostly technically minded electrical engineer or former electricians across the East Coast. And so I have responsibility from Maine all the way down to your home state of Florida.
That's right. And your folks out there in the field, tell me a little bit about their sales cycle, because I understand that with their technical background, they're all subject matter experts in some way, shape, or form. But talk to me a little bit about who they're selling to so the listeners have an idea about what your market really looks like.
Yeah, we work with a number of different customers, and I think our core customer base is largely electrical contractors. But because of the nature of our business, we're also engaged with consulting engineers, one's driving spec and preference, as well as I talked a little bit about industrial automation. We also work with industrial end users. And so we span everything from the residential marketplace, which in the United States is extremely hot right now, all the way up to large, complex commercial facilities. So it's a pretty broad set. I think when you look at the way in which we engage, we have two very different modes of business. One can be very transactional in nature, lots of products moving as SKUs and pieces and parts throughout the value chain. And on the other end of the spectrum are large, complex design projects. So it's a little bit of two modes and then everything in between.
And do your salespeople have to deal in both of those modes, or do you have some of them dedicated to the smaller, more transactional sales, and then some dedicated to more of those enterprise level sales?
Yeah, to a great extent, we try to separate them, and we try to align individuals that are skilled in dealing in high volume transactions and ones that are skilled in complex, designs and building electrical systems. Sometimes it blurs, but yeah, for the most part, we try to separate the two of them.
And then with a sales team that's coming out of the engineering space and then moving into sales. So for a lot of these salespeople that you're managing, sales was not their first career. They got degrees in something, they were working in the field, and then they decided that, sales is now something I can move into. I'm excited about it. I'm qualified for it. Talk to us a little bit about the transition that goes on with your salespeople in moving from that very technically related field to one where now you have to interact with humans every single day, where before it might have just been you, your work site, and your grid. Talk to us a little bit about how that works for them.
Right. Well, I think historically, there is a very technically minded individual as they enter into our world, and they bring with them a lot of knowledge and know-how and designing safe and efficient and reliable and sustainable energy systems And then they work to take that and understand and how to deliver value to the customer. I think that it's generalizing and to some extent as I share that, but we're seeing in the current environment, as we really focus on a diversity of our workforce, whether it's backgrounds, racial diversity, gender diversity, we're seeing a very broad background and skill set enter our world. So it's really kind of gone from an electrical competency as the majority to a very broad, diverse set of skills. All of them, though, enter into our world if they are entering as an early career talent and spend a lot of their first few years learning how to apply the knowledge to customers and create value.
But having that background is interesting because in a lot of sales positions, they're getting people right off the street that it might not have had a lengthy career in any other industry. Now they're dropped into sales. Where you coming from the opposite side of the spectrum, where your folks are technically skilled, they're proficient in something in order to be able to sell what they sell. Then they've got to learn the whole sales process. So talk to us a little bit about where you find salespeople, because you've been able to manage a lot of these people through, and I know you haven't retained all of them because there is turnover in any area of sales. The ones that have, done really, really well and the ones that haven't, there's something that differentiates the two. The ones that really took that technical background and were able to apply it in a way that allowed them to be able to interface with customers. Where do you see hope being relied on a little more than it should by these folks coming from one technically minded career field into the field of sales? Are they hoping that they wrap their head around the whole sales process and that it works a lot like their technical career did? Talk to us a little about where you see hope enter the picture and sometimes hold these salespeople back.
Sure. Well, listen, for a long time, it's been, and I think sales will always be a relationship and a personal, engagement. And I think when we look at how we're trying to evolve, what we're trying to do is transform, and many companies are going through a transformation and take all of the internal knowledge and really extract them using digital tools and trying to understand how to evolve just from I sell to my customer because I hunt and fish with them, or I know their kids, or our parents work together, and really evolve into understanding where there is opportunity within your customer base or your geography. And it's not always defined by, do you know that individual really, really well? And so I think when I think in terms of the biggest focus in how we evolve from hope is not a strategy type concepts, it is really trying to extract value out of our enterprise systems and our customer base. We've been around a long time, and we've got a lot of data at our fingertips. And so I think it starts with the company creating tools for our sales organizations to try to understand where they should be spending their time. We challenge our teams to really handle a number of customers that may even be a quantity that's more than they're capable of serving. And so it comes down to this very prescriptive decision on who do I call, and even to this extent of what should I talk to them about.
I love that. So prioritizing prospects, probably one of the first things that a technically minded person needs to learn how to do when they're dropped into the field of sales. And for a lot of salespeople that are dropped into the field of sales, whether they're early stage career, or whether they've had a career ahead of time, it often feels like sinking or swimming. So you either make it or you don't. And very few organizations are like yours in that they are giving some kind of prescriptive advice. Here's what we've found works really well. I've heard it from so many salespeople. They're dropped in and it's, here's your call list. Here's what we sell. Go to work without anything else behind it. So if we're talking about prioritizing prospects is one of the first things that great salespeople do that you've been able to train and lead up through the ranks. How are they able to wrap their head around that when they just provided a list or a geography? How do I go about beginning to understand prioritizing prospects given what I sell and what my technical knowledge might be that help me connect a solution for these folks so that I show up with something more to offer than, hey, would you like to buy my stuff?
Sure. Well, again, I think it goes back to this idea that if I'm a early seller and I show up at Schneider Electric and on day one, I get a list of customers, I think I look at that list in the sense that, okay, someone to a great extent has gone through a filter and decided these are the ones you should call first. But as a sales coach and a sales leader, we try to spend very specific times reviewing the success and failures of the calls to that list. And through that, what we will find is strategies that we can deploy or campaigns that we can deploy that sometimes may be an install-based campaign, and that, hey, that customer knows our product, they use our product, let's talk to them about additional products they should be considering. But on the flip side, we might say, hey, based on the customers that you called and the outcome, maybe the campaign that we should run is an acquisition campaign, or what you like to refer to as prospecting and bringing in new customers. So I think it is again a mix of using our data, our pipelining. We're a big believer in our CRM tool. And we use a lot of that, and then we supplement that with coaching and development from the leader to the sales organization.
And in prioritizing outreach or acquisition, we'll go ahead and use your term because it's a good one. If I'm trying to acquire new clients and yet I only know a lot about the thing that it is that we're selling, but not a lot about the sales process, where do you really start folks that are early stage career in sales with understanding it's not just about knowing the schematics and how all this stuff works, but actually tying it into a result that your prospect is after? How do you begin to build that bridge for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's even with our very tenured sellers, something that we're trying to do is transform from, hey, we know how to design world-class electrical distribution systems, and I would argue that the team I lead is as good as anyone in delivering those types of systems. However, what we try to do is understand how the customer is thinking and move beyond the electrical system as something that we are going to deliver, and really go to the other side of the equation of understanding their business, right? And in my world, we try to learn about things such as sustainability and how the customer that we are trying to serve views or is building a sustainability strategy or working to deliver a sustainability strategy to their customers. So I think generally we try to align what we can deliver with their business first and foremost, as opposed to starting with the electrical system or the industrial automation system. And it sounds simple, but it's very difficult as we transform as an organization.
That's what I was going to ask you next was, what is the chief challenge that you find salespeople run into? Because you've laid out a map, but I know there's a lot of twists, turns, eddies in the river that we have to navigate around that in order to figure out, is this prospect or this person I'm trying to acquire as a customer, are they actually concerned about that particular thing, like sustainability? Are they more concerned about their P&L, and sustainability is not top of mind for them as it applies to a PR effort, but as it applies to, hey, we need to get the lights on around here, so we need a cost-effective solution that might also be sustainable. But to understand exactly what that prospect is going through, how do you make sure that your salespeople don't go down the rabbit hole and it's the wrong rabbit hole?
Sure. Well, the challenge, and I'm a salesperson at heart, I've spent most, if not all of my career in sales, is that salespeople are creatures of habit. So they naturally gravitate to what they know best. All right. And as we've talked, what many of my sellers know best is customers they've been calling on for a long time, and how to design a world-class, safe and sustainable and reliable electrical system. So what we try to do is coach and teach in terms of the immense value in learning about the business, and really taking those skills that you have and your relationships and your knowledge of technical knowledge, and then applying it to that specific customer's business. When we do that, we often see the successful sellers rise to the top. The ones that are willing to take the risk and the challenge to go out on that limb where they might not be as comfortable are often the ones that see the most success. And then this great thing happens where salespeople are competitive too. They're creatures of habit, they're competitive. And when I see one of my peers that is more successful or having more success, I naturally get curious and also start to adopt some of those things that they do well.
And as we talk about acquisition, then, what are some of the things in your industry you are finding are working exceptionally well as we're in this strange kind of hybrid selling environment right now?
Sure.
What's working really well for your salespeople?
Well, you bring up an interesting aspect that is kind of we are learning in real time, and you referred to the hybrid selling environment, and I believe, well, I will tell you, when I hear hybrid environment, I hear virtual and face to face, and so we're learning in real time how we're doing that, and how we can do it successfully. Um, I think the biggest thing we're focusing on is coaching how to make connections and relationships through mediums like this, where historically we've always done it face to face. And we're seeing some great success. We're seeing individuals really generate some fantastic quota attainment and revenue growth digitally, while we're trying to also navigate the mix of getting back out there and spending time with the customer. But we're very much learning it in real time, and that's part of why I've enjoyed my time with you, as we debate ideas or discuss ideas back and forth, how to be successful. I don't know that we know all the answers, so I'm as much of a student on this topic as I am.
Well, I think the idea of acquiring clients based on your past experiences is a brilliant one, because you can build a connection around a lot of things, either technical competence, maybe a shared background in some way, shape, or form, a geography that you both live in or have lived in the past, but being able to build a relationship faster rather than having to build it from scratch by entering a conversation thinking to myself, I don't know anything about this person. I likely have nothing in common. I'm going to have to just try to slam down some doors in order to get into this organization. And obviously, that's a very tough way to go about doing it. There are much easier ways, as you mentioned, being able to understand a little bit about the technical needs that this company or this decision maker might have. But even to go deeper than that, as you talk about the technical needs, to discover you've got a lot in common personally. You like the same sports teams, your kids go to school in a similar area, whatever that might be. So as we talk about building a sales system for this, I think it might be very useful for all salespeople, especially those that are coming from a technical background with a lot of knowledge in their heads, but maybe new to the sales world. So as we talk about building systems for selling, and you're very familiar with this because we've chatted about it, we use this acronym TRIM because we're trimming hope away from our sales strategy. So the T in TRIM is the trigger. If I'm a salesperson coming at this situation where I'm trying to acquire a new client, maybe I've got a technical proficiency that's off the charts, but I'm new to the world of sales, or I need to understand, hey, I've got to build a relationship with this person before I can sell, just due to the nature of what it is we do, long sales cycle, whatever that might be. What's the trigger event to put a system into place that I can follow predictably to build that relationship with my client faster, either because of my technical expertise or a shared background in some way? Does that happen before I reach out? Does it happen through research? Or does that happen when I'm on the phone and I ask a couple of really great questions that open that conversation up? How would you recommend a salesperson start with a process like this?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I think this is, even within a tenured sales organization, something that is often forgotten, and that is the pre-call preparation. And what's amazing about the world we live in today, even though engaging like this is not my preferred way, I like to be in front of you and engaging face to face. But what's amazing and the tremendous opportunity that we have is there's so much information out there to be learned about either you individually or my customer individually, as well as the customer's environment and the world that they're living in. And if you skip that step, then you are having a tremendous impact negatively on your probability of success with that customer. And so there's many obvious, resources out there, social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, et cetera, where you can research not only the individual, but also the company. And if you do that, then you're going to have a pretty good game plan when you have that first call, particularly if you know nothing about the customer.
So as we talk about this trigger, then it sounds like it happens before the first call is ever made. And once that prospect has been identified, or even the company has been identified, that's when this system would start for a salesperson.
Absolutely. Has to.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. And so for the R in TRIM, the repeatable part of this process, obviously this could end up being dozens of steps long, but for everybody that's listening in, the memory doesn't really last that long for me either. So let's break this down into maybe half a dozen steps or less. But if you were going to hand this to your salespeople to say, here's a way that you can build your technical expertise, or through research, whatever you find you have in common with this prospect that you're targeting. Here are the steps to walk through. How would you advise your salespeople, build this kind of a checklist for themselves before they get ready to get on the phone?
Yeah, well, again, it starts with researching the customer and the individual that you're going to speak to. It then would shift to spending time thinking about how you take the core value that you're trying to deliver and position that in complement to the research that you just did. Right. And that is an extremely important step, in that it's one thing to know a lot about the customer, but if you can't find a way to support what that customer needs, and I mean, oh, by the way, oftentimes the customer doesn't know what they need. Right. So as a seller, it's an opportunity for you to spend time thinking about that. Then, the second step, again, is relating to that customer. The third step is, can sometimes, if you do it really, really well, be process the purchase order, but it can also be continuing to refine and deliver or develop the solution, right? And depending upon the business you're in, if it's a quick turnaround, fast sales cycle, those things are, lather, rinse, repeat. Just do it over and over and over again, and that recipe works pretty well. If you're into a longer sales cycle, I think there's likely other steps, but I think, those will start to present themselves and become somewhat obvious as you make that first connection.
As I think about the prospect and what they're trying to achieve, let's say I have a technical background like your folks do.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the worst things I could do is to get on the phone and then spend a half hour talking about the project build and all of the great steps that I know to put into this thing so that it works well and it lasts 1,000 years and all of that, because my prospect probably doesn't care unless they know how this thing is going to help them achieve their goals.
Sure.
So how do I either temper my technical knowledge or leverage my technical knowledge as part of this research process before I get in touch with the prospect to make sure that I'm not trying to sell them something that they're not sure they even have a need for?
Yeah, that's a great question. Salespeople love to tell you about what they're selling, including me. And the old adage of you have one mouth and two ears is one that if you just kind of keep that in the front of your mind. And I like to coach my team to ask open-ended, thoughtful questions, because what human nature, I believe, for the most part, is people like to talk about either themselves or the environment or their area of expertise or what they're responsible for. And so if you can get a customer talking, then in real time, you're getting real signals back that supplement all that research that you did. And so then when it does come time to introduce your solution to that customer's problem, you have so much information that your probability of success is very, very high. So, you bring up a key point, and that is, ask questions and then shut up and listen and take notes.
Take a lot of notes. Yeah. And knowing what those questions are ahead of time, I find, is extremely helpful. A lot of organizations call those discovery questions. There's a lot of names for them, but be able to map those out with your sales leader to know that here are the things that we need to know about this prospect in order to process an order or to build their enterprise level solution, and to recognize that I don't have to get all of that in one call, especially if what I have is a long sales cycle.
Right.
But if I show up with 5 of the 10 items answered through research, and I can get the prospect to reveal another 2 or 3 or 4, I'm infinitely further along, the process in my pipeline than I would be otherwise, trying to get in there cold and learn it all by myself, by trying to slam down doors. So I love the idea. We have the trigger. We've got making this thing repeatable. Now, the I in trim is making sure that this thing stays active and it iterates, that it's improvable. That's the I in trim. So how do I take this process that we've laid out and make sure that it doesn't remain static? Because if we laid this out in 2018 and we tried to use it in the world that we're in today, it wouldn't have the same result.
Sure.
So how do I assess the results of this, making sure that it is keeping up to date with the way my prospects are buying, the world that they're in? Because I know your industry's changed quite a lot in the last year or two. So how do I make sure that I'm improving this type of research process where I can leverage my technical expertise into the sale?
Well, I think there's a shared responsibility of improving. I think the good sales individuals often, maybe even always, reflect on their effectiveness after every call, right? So it's important as a seller that you're not going to close a PO every single time you call a customer, And eventually you'll get someone to buy something, even if you're not very good at sales at that point. And on both ends of the spectrum, it's important to reflect back and think about what would you do differently. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid to seek input from your direct leadership or your peers in terms of your performance and how you structured the sales call. And oftentimes, many of our sellers get very intimidated and nervous when we do buddy calls or when I show up to go see customers. Everyone feels like they're being evaluated. And in reality, what a seller should think is, this is great. I'm going to get real-time feedback on how I can be better at my job. So there's a lot of that. And I think there's a willingness on the seller's side and a duty on the sales leadership or the manager's side to have that real-time conversation. That will iterate and drive. But there's also another aspect, right, where when you do this over a broad, book of business, you will learn and you will start to understand, are you calling the right types of customers? Because you might be saying all the right things and doing all the right research, but not having the success. At which point your process and who you're choosing to call may be flawed. So there's
and that's something that I noticed, JD, after every single combat mission that we ran, these folks, these Marines would take the time to debrief their sales call, so to speak. And the way we've translated that into the world of sales is to ask just a couple of great questions. And if you have a leader there to do it with, it's even better. So I love the idea of being able to sit down with a leadership team or even a peer after the fact. But we ran them through a couple questions like, hey, knowing what I know now, what could I have done differently as a salesperson in that meeting?
Yeah.
And then the second question, knowing what I know now about how that meeting went, what should I have known about the prospect going in? And it may have been impossible. There's no way to know that about the prospect, that they lived in Lake Wobegon in 1955, right? Maybe that's just not anywhere on the internet, but it would have been valuable had you known that going in. So maybe that triggers your mind next time to start looking. And the final question, this is one that it's great for sales leaders to be present in here, is knowing what I know now about how that meeting went, what should my company have provided to me? Research, spec sheets, pricing, discount codes, whatever it could have been that really would have been important to have in that meeting at that time. Not to say that it's going to be available every single meeting, but to know that that would have been really helpful. That at least lets your organization know, hey, start producing that or making sure it's in the hands of salespeople. So if we've gotten the trigger, making it repeatable, improvable, now the final bit is making sure the system actually works, making it measurable. That's the M in trim. How do I measure a discovery process like this, where I'm doing a lot of research and then leveraging my technical expertise to hopefully work with my client to build a solution to the problem that they have? How do I measure it to make sure that this thing's better than whatever I was doing before? Should I be measuring meetings driven, business closed, movement through the pipeline? There's so many things to measure in the world of sales. How would you start measuring this?
Yeah, well, I think oftentimes this is specific to the business and the sales cycle. If you're in a very quick sales cycle, you might measure very different things than if you're in a long sales cycle or transactional versus project. But I think the key thing is to actually measure and evaluate. And I think it's key for a number of reasons. Number one, as a sales leader, every sales leader in the world has to forecast and commit to a certain amount of revenue that they're going to produce over a certain period. So at a minimum, you can't do that if you're not capturing the outcomes of your calls and the volume of calls, et cetera. But I think for an individual seller, what is often missed that I see is when sellers, they love to sell, they love to do the face-to-face, and then they view the entering the outcome into a CRM or a spreadsheet or a tracker as a burden.
Who has time for that? Come on.
Exactly. And you know what? In fairness, there's probably a real aspect to that.
Yeah.
But what is often missed in that is the seller's ability to not just look back at their performance on an individual sales call. You're going to learn a lot from that, but there's an immense amount you can learn across a broad number of sales calls, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where you can start to refine your broader strategies. And so for me, clearly the number of calls always matter. And when I say call, that can be this, it can be face-to-face. If you have the ability to log the working opportunities, that matters, because then you can get into sales stages and understand your sales cycle, and you can
Pipelines, yeah.
predict pipeline and what you need in certain buckets. But I really think it comes down to the type of business that you're in and the tools that you have at your disposal, right? Because I realize your customer base is everything from a very, very small business of maybe a one person that is doing both the coaching and the learning, all the way up to large corporate clients. And the resources and tools that they have at their disposal can vary dramatically. But the ability to track does not vary. Everyone has the ability, and they should.
Whether you're doing it in a CRM, I've built this for companies as well, where you just build a call log sheet, list all the objections that you might run across, add new ones if you find them. And then the one that I love the most, and this is something that's really important for a call assessment, is if they couldn't buy for whatever reason, what was the reason that they gave?
Right.
Because that unlocks new objections, or it unlocks your competitors who they're actually going to be buying from. So great way to go about doing it, JD. We've got the trigger, making it repeatable, improvable, and measurable based upon the type of business you're in and the type of messing my words up, selling that you're doing. So a complete sales system around leveraging technical expertise, building relationships before the call. That's an amazing thing for any salesperson to take forward. So for folks that are interested in learning more about you, JD, Schneider Electric, how do they find you? How do they find the company? Maybe they're thinking to themselves, I got a technical background in engineering. I need to go work for JD. How do they get into your world?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the greatest place to start to learn about our company is SchneiderElectric.com. What you will find is that we're a very large global company with many, many different types of businesses. And while we like to talk about how cohesive all the businesses are and how they are targeted squarely and specifically at electrical systems or electrical distribution or industrial automation, the fact is underneath that broad statement is a lot of really, really cool companies and a lot of really cool technology. We, as I talked earlier, one of the things that I love about our company is our vision. And our vision is certainly to serve our customers, but really it's above and beyond that. It talks about, as I shared, energy as a human right. And we're a global company. So energy as a human right means something very, very different in the United States than it might mean in a third world country. But we operate all over the world. We are doing meaningful work around sustainability and trying to make systems more friendly to our environments. We are absolutely in the market for all different types of individuals, including salespeople. You don't have to be an electrical engineer to be successful here. We have an amazing early career onboarding program. If you want to learn more about our employment opportunities or our various initiatives and things that we are thinking about and working with our customers to solve, LinkedIn's a great place. You can find my LinkedIn profile. You can contact me directly there. You can introduce yourself to multiple others in my organization. We are looking aggressively for the next generation of sellers to bring into our sales development program. So I'm very passionate. I could talk all day long, but that'll get the audience started.
Love it, man. And that's definitely something to look into. If you're hearing what JD is talking about and you're saying that's a company that I align with, that's got my values in it, and I love the fact that he's doing good things in the world, make sure you're reaching out to JD. I know you will not regret that decision. For us here at Bulletproof Selling, of course, make sure you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where all of these live stream conversations are housed absolutely free. You talk about this being a brilliant conversation. We got dozens more right up there ready to go for you and your sales team. Of course, the podcast that gets produced out of this is on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found. And for more sales systems to help you replace hope with certainty across your pipeline, check out the free resources coming on every single week at www.bulletproof-selling.com. Well, Sean Rhodes here. As always, it's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you, JD. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.